Hey guys, it's TRIZE here. We're getting the most horsepower on this naturally aspirated inline 6 engine. This is the final inline engine in this category at Automation's Aspirated update, which is version 4.3. The next I'll cover soon is the V engines. So anyways, for this engine build, you start off by going to the top left portion of your screen to maximize the year to the year of 2020. And after you've chosen the inline 6 engine, you must choose the aluminum silicon heavy block material because it's the best in terms of power density and the ability to upboard the engine as much as possible, which you'll see later. So for the family capacity, the first thing you gotta do is maximize the bore to 120 millimeters, and going over to the stroke here is you set this to 91.2 millimeters, which gets the family engine size capacity to 6,189 cubic centimeters, or about 6.2 liters. And we're using a dual overhead cam 5 valves per cylinder made out of aluminum silicon. And this is interesting for the new tech pool used. So this was the second patch that this was used. Interesting. So ignoring all that, for the quality slider right next to this, easy maximize to a plus 15 for everything you see, a quality slider for the engine builder. And in that quality slider, this little box here, you click on the sandbox tech pool to open up this here window. And under the engine tech right here is you maximize everything to a plus 15, starting with the engine itself, then to the bottom end, the top end, and you can skip the turbocharger. Plus 15 for the fuel system and for the exhaust. And after you maximize everything you see here, and again, you may maximize the turbocharger even though we're not going to be using this whatsoever in this video, you click on Apply Changes and we'll head on over to the bottom end of this engine. So with the varying capacity at the bottom end, like I mentioned here about the upboarding part, is to increase this to 124 millimeters to upboard this, which gets the true engine size to 6,608 cubic centimeters, or 6.6 liters for the true engine size. And the crank count rods and pistons pretty much the usual, so just billet steel, regular billet steel crankshaft, titanium con rods, and some forged heavy pistons with a harmonic damper implemented. And the counterweight slider right next to this, maximize it to 220, which is the highest setting for the counterweight slider, and same thing, plus 15. For the compression, you maximize this like my previous engine builds to 16.0 to 1 ratio in extreme level. Same thing with the freaking cam profile at 100. And the springs and lifters, it's like my inline 5 engine build, set it to 59. With VVT at all cams, with the RPM set just like the previous engine at 8,400 RPM. And you skip over the turbocharger because it's a naturally aspirated build, so for the injections or the fuel system, it will be injected, so in specific, a direct injection throttle per cylinder race intake with the manifold size set to a 93, a large boy. And the fuel, we're using some nitromethane, aka the top fuel dragster fuel, with the ignition timing margin right below this as you advance it as much as possible to a -5, which is advancing it. The fuel mapping, set this to a 30, leaning more towards the lean setting. And finally, for the exhaust, the headers, and everything else in general, so for the headers, we're using some tubular racing headers with the header size set to an 84, with the exhaust size, the diameter set to 88.9 millimeters, which equals to 3.5 inches. And we're not going to be using any cats and no mufflers, and bring up the quality. And this is the final horsepower rating we got here of 2,974 horsepower at 8,400 RPM, with the torque at 1,859.4 pounds-feet of torque at 8,400 RPM. So just like the previous engines, the inline 5 and the 4, is that the power and torque peaks at redline at 8,400 RPM. And the con rods here is that we got some extreme amount of stress being applied, as 96% of stress has been applied to the pistons, or reliability reduction, which is only 4% away from just destroying the engine. But fear not, it does work as fine in BeamNG drive and in automation, but if I were to increase this to 8,500 RPM, then the engine will fail because the con rods have failed due to excessive RPM. Because technically, these are rated up to 6,300 RPM with this kind of engine setup with the bottom end that we got going here. But hey, if it works in automation, it should work in BeamNG drive, no problem. Okay, so for this portion of the video, seeing it's not version 4.2 of how I test the engines, the best thing I'm going to do is just do a regular pull test, and I'm guessing by just manually doing it, I'll try to do the fake gear shifts with the little throttle thing right here in the RPM target. We'll give you some detailed analytics of like the carbon, like the exhaust emissions, greenhouse gases that go out, and everything else, the engine in general. So anyways, just screw all that, let's do a pull test right now. That's pretty much the best I could do with the new freaking dyno graph that we got here of test out the engines. If it would have been version 4.2, then the fake gear shifts would have been much more seamless compared to what I did just now. So about this massive engine that makes nearly 3,000 horsepower, all I can say is that it's more powerful and larger than your stereotypical 2JZ engine. You can fit this engine on a handful of cars in automation to be driven in Beam and G. Just make sure you use some wide, grippy tires as you'll generate a lot of wheel spin due to how powerful it is. If you don't, then you'll lose control every time you accelerate. So anyways, that'll do it with Automation, the Car Company Tycoon games version 4.3. And for those who are interested in this type of content, please be sure to like and subscribe so you won't miss out on any videos like this in the future. So this is TRIZE Rising Up, and signing out.